Welcome back to episode 152 of Tall Boy Radio. Now, we are aware that it's the festive period, but there's a reason why we're doing it now, I should say as well. We're going to do something a little bit more somber than we normally do around about the Christmas time. However, there's a very valid reason for it, and we'll get to that just in a second. So before we do, let's introduce the two guys who are joining us tonight. Gaza?
Evening, lads. Evening, the world. Sure. Looking forward to it. Just having a nice drop of brewdog out of a St. Bernardus glass. There you go, St. Bernardus. And strangely enough, it is a triple hazy, which again is very, very, very pleasant. And just after that, just as a little aperitif, I took a beer and Moretti just as a standard beer there. So yeah, actually a slightly more somber episode tonight, but no doubt informative and enjoyable nonetheless.
Indeed, indeed. Dave?
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I am equally ill-prepared this week on the alcohol front. I called my mother to see if she'd got anything, but she'd only got a can of Carling in the fridge. I left that where it was, and then had a look what we got, and it's a rather sad Tesco's pear cider. And I've already tried one. They're awful. But I did find it, following on from a recent episode, a nice glass of red. It's not beer, but it's red wine. So
we'll take it. It's probably the best of those three options. Probably that pear cider is still the second best, despite the fact it probably doesn't taste great. I'll tell you what I'm drinking. It's 152 episodes of Tall Boy Radio, and it's the first time I've actually had a Tall Boy on here. And it is Liquid Light Brewing Company's Arbor Sunset Vista Double IPA. And that's quite a mouthful. And I'll say it now before I drink it because it's 8.4%. Right. So let's get down to business. We said we were going to do a little bit more of a serious episode tonight. And it's something that's quite dear to us around here because we're going to talk about an unsolved murder that happened in this very area, literally a stone's throw from all our houses at this time of year, which is the reason why we've chosen to do it now rather than, another time of the year when it isn't relevant. But it's important and it's dear to us, guys. So there was a murder that happened just before Christmas in 1990. Can you guys cast your mind back to 1990 and remember anything about it and, how it impacted you at the time?
I don't remember huge details or all. I mean, obviously, I'm aware of it and now doing a bit of research and stuff for this episode, but I do remember thinking like, wow, like, holy shit, it's also just nothing really ever like that happens near us. We're not like a massive crime central sort of thing. We're certainly not like murder capital of anywhere. So when it happened, it's like, wow, what the fudge? And so there was that one, and then wasn't the one at was it the old like university site campus? Was there one on the car park or something? And there was something happened there. Was it a murder or something? So they were the two that really stuck in my mind. Like, oh wow, okay, crikey. But yeah, I remember people being a bit sort of scared and stuff as well, just because the nature of who it was that was attacked, and perhaps I'll get onto that in terms of people were like a bit wary about travelling around and stuff. So, but yeah, I do remember. I don't remember loads of details at the time, but yeah, I definitely remember hearing about it, reading about it.
Indeed. Just to touch back there to what the other one that Gaz mentioned. So, yeah, so it was the Manchester Metropolitan University Crewe and Allsage campus. Now, that one was a solved case and, it involved someone getting extradited from the USA. And actually, the girl who was murdered was a roommate of a very good friend of ours. So probably one of the reasons why we didn't really want to touch that one, because obviously, A, it's been solved, and B, it's obviously a very sensitive matter for him. And obviously, the reason why he's never bought a newspaper since, because there was treatment by the British press and how they hounded him to get information out of him. Whereas the one we're going to talk about today, obviously, is an unsolved case, and the family have asked on numerous occasions for help in solving it. So, Dave, it's dangerous asking Dave with his memory, but can you remember back to 1990?
Well, I was 17 at the time, and the place that we're going to talk about I could see from my bedroom window. But no, I can't remember it at all. I just can't.
I do. And fully enough, at that time, I was a diary keeper. So I have my diary from 1990. I kept diary from 86 all the way through to about 2005, funnily enough, wrote in them every single day. And I remember writing about it in the time. I've not got it out to reflect on it because, frankly, there'd be no benefit to doing that. But yeah, I know I can remember writing about it at the time and being shook by it. So the murder we're referring to was a taxi driver who was killed a couple of days before Christmas. And the murder happened in a place called Mow Cop. And now, if you're out there, and we're very aware that we go out to 52 countries, we still want you to listen. But we're really talking to the people in the UK here because there is still a reward for this murder to be solved. So if you have any information, we'd love for you not to get in touch with us, and I'll give out the number at the end, to get in touch with Crime Stoppers. So, guys, do you want to tell the people out there a little bit about Mow Cop? And Dave, do you want to start off by telling us, you said you could see it from your bedroom window. Tell us what is so significant about that place.
Well, the Mow Cop itself, I think, you have to correct me, is like a little village. It's quite high up on a hill. And what we would, when everyone mentions Mow Cop around here, they mean they say Mow Cop Castle, but it's not actually a castle. I think it was a, what's the word? Not a
folly.
A folly. So it's just built to look like a place to go and have your picnics or whatever, but it's not an actual castle. And that's, although it's fallen down quite a bit, quite a lot of the original structure is still down on top of the hill, and anywhere around here when the skies are clear, you can see it, and it's a bit of a local landmark.
It absolutely is. Yeah, it absolutely is. Can you elaborate any more on that, Gaza?
Not huge. I mean, I know that it wasn't National Trust, the English Heritage. I think it's grade 2. I think it's grade 2 listed, isn't it? And I think English Heritage own it, I think. But yeah, it's one of those places that you can sort of see from miles around, such as the Staffordshire, Shropshire. You can see it from miles around, some things. But yeah, as Dave said, loads of people refer to it as a castle, but it never actually was a castle as such. So yeah.
So when my cousin Bo came to stay with us, one of the things he was keen to see was castles in the UK, because obviously it's something they don't have in America. And I said, well, faithfully, the room you'll be staying in, you can actually see a castle from there. And technically, like Dave says, it's not a castle, it's a folly. So yeah, as Dave said, the village of Mow Cop is on the Staffordshire-Cheshire border, and it dates back to around about 1270 AD. And its famous castle is actually a folly built by a Randall Wilbraham in 1754, who lived in Road Hall. And it was built as a summer house somewhere that you could enjoy his sandwiches in front of. So you were spot on, actually, Dave, there with your description of the area.
I also wonder whether or not, sorry, just to put in that, I don't know whether it is, but I vaguely remember something, because the Wilbraham name and the Wilbraham family are sort of associated with Road, Pool Hall, and then obviously we have a pub in Old Stage called Wilbraham Arms or Wilbraham Arms, and I'm sure that there's a link there. I'm not quite sure why the Wilbraham Arms was called that, but I'm almost certain it dates back to the same family.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right, because there was a very old property on there before, the old Creswell Shore house, which, interestingly enough, was knocked down, and they built the Wilbraham Arms pub with the bricks from the old Creswell Shore house, which is in the Creswell Shore area of Alsager. So just to give you a little bit about the facts about the gentleman in question. So his name was Stephen Johnson, and he was a 25-year-old father of 2 young girls. He was a trainee insurance agent by day and had taken on a taxi driving job for Scraggs Taxis to earn some extra money for Christmas and for his family. He was 6'4" and described as a gentle giant, a man who was not the type of person to fall out with anyone, very well-natured man. And I think that's something we need to keep in mind, because so little about that evening and what happened to him is actually known, that the likelihood of him falling out with somebody in the back of a taxi or the taxi that he was driving, people find that a very, very unlikely situation. Yeah. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk through the timeline of what happened. And if you guys want to chime in, at any time, just feel free to do so. I apologize if it sounds like I'm reading a lot of this, but I have typed it up and I don't want to get the facts wrong for the obvious reasons.
Sure. So when I mentioned that we were doing this episode for a couple of people, and I won't mention the name, but somebody said to me that they lived in and around the Mow Cop area at the time, and they were actually just as part of routine questioning, obviously nothing sinister, but they were questioned by the police, because the police went out and because they didn't really have any leads, they went out and literally questioned every single person in the local area, like, where were you, what were you doing, did you say anything, where did you go? And he was he was traveling on public transport, and they said, well, he proved and stuff, and he got his ticket. And obviously then they cross-reference the ticket with the machine that registers the ticket. They said, okay, yeah, you were on there, so we can eliminate you from our inquiry, sort of thing. But he remembers the furor, I suppose, and the frantic nature of literally they went round and literally questioned everybody just because there were no real solid leads as such. And obviously that still remains the case today. So
it does. Unfortunately, you're quite right there. And like Gaz says, questioning an awful lot of people in there. Literally went round the whole of Mow Cop and anyone in that local area, as Gaz said. And you have obviously we don't know his name there, but that person sort of corroborates that story. So we'll start off then the timeline. So we're going back to the 21st of December 1990. Like I said, just before Christmas. And at 8 o'clock, this gentleman started his work at the taxi firm. Now, he normally started at 9 o'clock, but on this evening, he started at 8 o'clock because he wanted to earn a few little bits of extra money. And like we said, you know yourself, Christmas time, busy time for taxi drivers. So he'd just put his 2 children to bed, and it was a busy shift, and by 2 a.m., he'd picked up over 20 fares. Now, the last fare where the traveller was known to the taxi company was round about 3:15. But he's known to have picked up other fares after that, because obviously when you book a taxi, you know, it's not like it is nowadays if you're calling an Uber where you've got that whole trail. Literally, you'd pick up a phone, can I have a taxi, please? You leave your name and they send it to where you give. And then obviously on the way, you can hail them down, you can jump in. So like I say, he was known to have picked up other fares. His last pickup was in Hanley Street in Hanley around 3:30 a.m., possibly from the Freetown Club, which was in that vicinity, and he headed to Packmore. Now, Packmore, guys, Dave, I'm sure you'll know where Packmore is, didn't you? I'm sure your brother had a party there on one occasion, I seem to recall.
I don't remember that, but I know roughly where Packmore is. Yeah.
Indeed. So, like I say, on the 22nd of December, sometime before 4 a.m., an argument was heard near a car, which is believed to be the taxi in question, on the corner of Lordship Place. One man stormed off after the argument, and he was wearing a light-coloured coat. Now, it's not clear whether he or anyone else returned to the car, but it is believed that there was another passenger in the car. So, what we think happened is, or what the police think happened is, he picked up 2 people in the area that had possibly been to this club, Freetown Club. Are you guys familiar with that at all?
It doesn't ring a bell. No, I must admit, I'm not sure where. I mean, obviously, you know, 17, you go out in Hanley back in the day, and you think, okay, there's certain clubs and stuff that you might know, but I don't place it. Must admit, no.
No, it's not one I'm familiar with. I did Google it. It was listed as a bit of a fruity place, as one of the tastier places if you fancied a fight with the old fists back in the day to go for a pint. But again, and that could be just about anywhere in Hanley back then, I think. To be fair.
That's the whole of the Hanley. Yeah.
That's it. So police would like to speak to the man in the light-coloured coat, but he's never come forward either. So if there was 2 people in the back of the car, one thing that we can assume is there's at least one person knows who that other individual was, and if we're assuming he's the guy who did it.
And you sort of assume, I mean, I don't know, and it might be some sort of spurious logic, but maybe you'd sort of assume they might know each other.
It's a fair assumption.
They're in a taxi that, you know, okay, yeah, you hail a taxi, but if it's somebody that you don't know, and you've got no affinity with, you've got no loyalty to, you've got, you know, and that happened, and the police were questioning, unless I suppose you were scared in a way for your own safety, but then you think, well, I don't really know the guy, he doesn't really know me, he'll have, because back in the day, you know, he'll have no details of me, it's not like there's going to be records of who it was and names and trails and all that, so it sort of makes you wonder whether or not the second guy in the taxi would actually knew the first guy in the taxi, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Well, I think that's the assumption. Now, like I say, there was some argument, and one thing we know, when there's an argument, there's emotions involved. So if these 2 knew each other and had fallen out about, you know, with each other, so maybe it was the 2 passengers who were having a heated debate. Maybe it was one of the passengers having a heated debate with the driver, who we know to be a fairly even-tempered man.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. Is do we know whether or not, and the witnesses that heard the arguments, do we know whether or not that was the two people from the taxi arguing with each other, or was it one of them and then driver, in which case, where was the other guy if it was one of the taxi drivers? Do you know what I mean? It's not sure.
I guess in those days there wasn't the same level of CCTV or mobile phones or dashboard cameras or any of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and around Mow Cop, it's not a massively travelled place as such. Obviously, what would happen is they would have gone from Hanley, and they would have been going across the top of Mow Cop area, across the top towards Packmore. So that might have been why they were there, unless, of course, the second person's drop off was Mow Cop or what. You don't know, do you?
No.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge. There's so little is actually known. But like you say, I find it suspicious that this individual hasn't come forward. Like you say, if he had a rough idea who this person was, but didn't feel like he owed him anything, he would have come forward. So
that's what I mean. Yeah.
I think the assumption must be that he knew that person, he knew that individual, didn't necessarily know what he had done, but maybe found out afterwards, especially when he'd seen the news in the next day or two, that he would have had a good idea of who it was who had done it. And at this point in time, he's still choosing to keep that to himself.
The pickup from Hanley then, was that only one person?
Nobody knows. Like I say, we know that his last known passenger was at 3:15, and it was a female, and he took her home and he dropped her off in an area. I think it could be Longton. I could be wrong. Not really important. And then he headed back into the centre of Hanley because he knew it was going to be busy and there was fares to be picked up. And obviously, I think he picked someone else up on the way there, took them back into the Hanley area, and picked this individual or individuals up at that time. Now, I think he called it through. They knew roughly where he was going, and I think they knew where he was going afterwards. Well, we know that he went to the Mow Cop area, so he'd obviously given that information out there. But what he didn't give, unfortunately, is the key details of the names of the people or person, because it could have just been the one. He could have picked up another person in Packmore. Nobody really knows. It could have been an altercation where he's dropping one guy off and this guy's arguing, look, I just want a taxi drive. I'm in Packmore. Take me to there. We don't know, so we don't know.
And again, it's one of those back in the day, there wouldn't have been as much scrutiny as Dave said in terms of, he would have just rung it through and said, I've got a fare. I'm going to be 20 minutes or whatever. I'll go on to the next one or half an hour, whatever, perhaps back in the day that they're not necessarily going to say, well, who is it, where you're going, how long you're going to be. They certainly wouldn't have. Well, I'd be surprised if they did have the trackers on the cars that show exactly where they are, and all that. I mean, you've got your Google Maps now and your Uber apps and stuff that show literally pinpoint where cars are. But back in the day, that wouldn't have been the case. So he probably rung it in and gone, I've got a fare. I'm next available in, like I say, half an hour, 40 minutes, whatever that may be.
Exactly. And after he dropped this guy off, the plan was for him to return to the taxi rank.
Yeah. Did they know? Sorry. When you said he was whoever it was, he was then due to return back to the taxi rank. Did he have another fare lined up for when he'd got back? Then had they effectively?
No. That was good. Okay. That was going to be the end of his shift.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So around about 4 a.m., a car is heard labouring up Castle Hill. Now, like Dave said, it's a pretty steep hill. And I can tell you, I can remember my brother had a Morris Minor, and I forget who was in it. Gaz might have been in it, actually.
I was in it.
Oh, you?
Yeah. I was in it. I remember that.
Yeah, we tried to take it was quite late one evening, and we decided
to
drive
a mile
up.
in a car.
Yeah, it wouldn't go. You can't get a Morris Minor with 4 guys in up that hill. It is a very, very steep hill. That's the point I'm making. I guarantee you're going to think I can do it in third. You're going to end up dropping down to second at some point.
Yeah, it's definitely a second gear. Yeah,
they have that race, don't they? The Killer Mile.
The Killer Mile. Yeah,
it's called that for a reason.
It is, because you don't want to be running it. It is, it's bad. So, at around 5 a.m., Scraggs Taxis, concerned by the lack of contact, like I say, he was expected back around about 4:30, sent out another taxi to look for car number 5. And they headed to Mow Cop, they drove around, and they found nothing. So, unfortunately, obviously, it's a little bit of like a cobweb, the roads around there, isn't it, when you think about it? And unfortunately, he would head, I would imagine, to the key spots towards the castle and around there. And unfortunately, he didn't see any sight of him. So then returned and reported back that he couldn't see anything. So I say the following day, but it was later that morning. So it was still on the 22nd December at around 7 a.m. The abandoned taxi is spotted and is found. So around about 7 a.m. this is. And the interesting thing about it is there's two things left in there. All the night's takings were still sat there.
Yeah.
So every bit of money. So the motive wasn't robbery. And also one thing that Steve was famous for was when he was out and he was running his errands and his runs, he had a handheld TV. And interesting enough, that Christmas, I remember I had one of those Casio handheld TVs myself that year. And he used to take that and watch that in between, obviously not while he was driving, but in between while waiting for the fares, he would watch his little handheld TV. And that was still there as well. So we can entirely rule out robbery, which fortunately, I think when most taxi drivers will tell us when they're involved in crime, tends to be the motivation behind it.
Yeah, it's either, you know, it's either robbery, and I suppose in a way it's a type of robbery, or fair jumping, you know, so people, you know, you turn up at your venue, you jump out the back of the car without paying. Not that I've ever done that, but you know, it's hard to know. It's hard to know. I think without robbery, and we don't know because it's unsolved. You know, what are the motives? And you read a little bit of information, and unless, and I'm not suggesting for a minute he was at all, but unless he was leading some really secretive second life that literally nobody knew about, and he got himself in a bit of bother, whether it be with unsavory characters or this and that, and he owed money or whatever, but like nobody knew about that, so that's highly unlikely.
Yeah,
you know, was it just an opportunistic feeling, but like just the violent nature of it was like it almost, when you read it, it was almost like a personal. It felt personal, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
you know, just the nature of the wounds, the nature of the murder. You always felt like it wasn't just. It was very brutal and very personal, wasn't it? Sort of thing. So
you're
weird.
right. Yeah, it was. It was very brutal. And round about 7:30 a.m., so not long after the taxi was discovered, as you would imagine, the body was found, and it was found by a dog walker. And they discovered Stephen Johnson face down in the snow. It staggered about 20 yards down a farm lane. The snow was falling on him, so they can roughly place the amount of time when it happened based by the amount of snow that was on top of him. And his throat had been cut. Both his jugular and carotid arteries had been severed. So like Gaz said, very, very aggressive crime.
Yeah.
And like you say, it's difficult to imagine someone doing that without some form of personal motivation. However, there's absolutely nothing to suggest any of that sort of lifestyle that, you know, might not have been known about him. He was a family man working hard to feed his family, and he was a good guy who was not a confrontational man at all. So yeah, that is, yeah, it's a very, very horrid crime, and the fact that it's gone all this time unsolved, 32 years, and we still don't know who did it, is pretty significant and quite upsetting, really, isn't it?
It is just sorry, Dave, go on.
I was going to say it is because, you know, for all we know, it could be someone that we know, someone that's still could be living in and around this area. And as you said, we can see it. I don't know if you can, Gaz, but me and Adam can see it from actually my house now, as well as my mum's former house. So, you know, we don't know. It could be someone that's still around in their early 60s, something like that, maybe.
I mean, it's one of those that, you know, he was a local guy. He picked up taxi fares from local people, dropped them off in the local area. So the assumption, and again, you know, it's difficult when you do that, and it's not always correct, obviously, but the assumption is that whoever did this was a local person. It wasn't somebody that was traveling through the city. And when you read the information about it, it does feel like it was a local person. So somebody in not too far away from where we now live must know something, or it was. I remember thinking, you know, there would be people who, and thankfully, you know, it was never committed again. But at the time, it was like, are they targeting taxi drivers? And is this some sort of vendetta? Is something, and you know, is something else going to happen? Is somebody else going to happen? And I know it put people off for a little bit, sort of, traveling effectively in taxis. And I know it wasn't a taxi driver that committed the crime, but you associate traveling around and stuff, and you never know who's going to get in there and stuff. So I remember there being a big furor about it, but yeah, as Dave said, it's worrying. I say it's worrying. I mean, I have absolutely no personal sort of impact in, affiliation with the crime whatsoever, but it's worrying that it might be somebody that is in your local community that you just don't know.
Absolutely. We just don't know. So there was one piece of evidence, or believed piece of evidence, and I do remember this, and it's strange the things that will stick with you over time. So I can remember this from sort of 30 odd years ago, and if you'd have asked me what it was, I could have told you, but I've got a bit more detail about it now. So at the same time, not far from where his body was found, they found a video club membership card, and it was covered in roughly the same amount of snow. So police believe that it was placed there at roughly the same amount of time or time distance away from when the body was, because of the level of snow that had fallen upon it. And it's thought that this could possibly have belonged to the killer. Now, the number on the card was 328, but the signature is illegible. Police appeal for information, but no one, not even the video card supplier, has ever come forward. So
that's what because what would happen is, right, and I'm sort of going to make an assumption, but again, if they owned the video part company and it was actually their company and they didn't want to come forward because it's them, you would know that because the police would have asked them questions.
Yeah, before we get to that, there's one piece of information we probably need to share, because there's going to be a number of people out there who are younger than us and perhaps don't know what a video shop membership card is, which is the point I was just about to make. So do you want to tell them what that is? Because there's going to be nowadays, it's probably ordering from Netflix, what the hell are you on about? So do you want to explain to people what that is before then you can go back and make your point again? Sorry.
So a video was, oh my God, how would you explain a video? Like VHS, Betamax and all of that malarkey. Dave, you're the techie. Do you want to explain what video is? Come on, mate, help us out.
All right, so now if you want to watch a film, you just go onto your computer, your phone, you stream it. Before that, you'd have something called a DVD, which is something you'd put into a player and you'd play it. Well, before that, we had something called VHS cassettes, which were basically magnetic tape, like very thin tape that was wound round and round and round and round in every individual frame of the film, and the music was on the tape. And as you put that into a cassette player, it plugged it into your TV and it played the film. So it's a bit like going to the old movies with the big reels and tapes, but in a smaller format to plug it in. So you've got to be our kind of age to remember that, which is quite old.
And obviously these things were at the time quite expensive to buy, so you could rent them. You'd go to your old video store. So if you ever see these posts on Instagram of people harking back to days of yore when Blockbuster was the thing, that was one of those places where you walk around, select your film, hand over a little piece of cardboard, and if you're really lucky, it sat inside a little plastic wallet to protect it. And then you would rent the video and take it back so as not to incur a fine. And this is what was left on the ground nearby, was a little video card membership. So, sorry, Gaz, make your point again there. I interrupted you a little.
No, it's okay. So I was just thinking, so the video card was on the ground. So I'm thinking two trains of thought, right? If it's the killers, which is what you're led to believe, because it wasn't Stevens, so you're led to believe it's the killers. If the killer was the owner of the video part company, police would have questioned them and followed that line of inquiry if they didn't come forward, and their lines of inquiry would think, oh, on this guy's Rick Shady, then it got to him being the perpetrator. If the murderer wasn't the owner of the company, then why the hell did the owner of the company not have records of who card number, whatever it was, belonged to? And why did therefore they not come forward? And that is the nub of, I can't get my head around how it still remained unsolved, because for him to have that card, if assuming it is the murderess, there would have to have been some exchange of information between him and the video company, name, address. I mean, back in the day, it's not as stringent back then as it is now, but at least a name and an address.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you just think it cannot be that hard to trace, can it?
I know.
Can it?
But if the murderer was the owner of the company, he's obviously not going to come forward. But the police are going to approach him as the owner of the company. Say, we've got one of these cards here, dude. Like, can you just tell us who whatever the number was, 328 or whatever the number was? You know, can you tell us who owned? No, sorry, can't do that. Well, why not? Well, can't. Sorry. GDPR, well, bollocks to that, because that wasn't a thing back in 1990, sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Wasn't, no.
So all of a sudden, if he's then not coming forward, the police are going to go, hold on a minute, that doesn't sound quite right, and they're going to bang him to rights. If it's not the murderer, then why would you not tell the police?
Do you have that information, Ad? Because presumably they knew what the rental shop was.
I don't. Yeah, I don't have that information, unfortunately. But I'd like to think it's out there somewhere. And all we would need, Staffordshire Police, is just to release that information out onto the internet and with the sleuths. And that's the interesting thing. And that's not what we're trying to do here, by the way. We're not trying to be super sleuths. We're not trying to solve it. Although I do think Gaz has made a really, really vital point there that may or may not have been missed by Staffordshire Police. Let us know if you did pick it up and ruled it out. We'd be interested to know. But there are a number of people out there who are digging deep into this kind of stuff, and almost, our friend Mary from Purposely Curious has covered a number of these cases where people on the internet have dug deep into this and actually solved old cases, old cold cases that the police haven't, and if you want it solved, nobody cares how it gets solved. This isn't a matter of pride for the police, and I'd like to think they wouldn't view it that way, but I think it would be lovely to see a little bit more information out there so that these people could actually get their teeth into it. There is a danger that these things get blown out of proportion.
Yeah, and I get that, but you look at the family, and I don't know, and I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I suspect they wouldn't give two flying fudges how it was solved, whether it was a band of internet people or the police. They just want it solved.
Yeah, I know that's how I'd feel about it anyway.
I wonder if I can't remember renting the videos, but I wonder if there was a time or a place where actually you just had a membership card, just a number, and you just paid a deposit, so they didn't need to know who you were, because if you didn't come back with a video, they just keep your deposit.
Well, possibly, I remember back to the 90s, and
I remember there's a couple of video places, Silverglade, Old and Video Park, and places like that, and you had to register at least the name. Now, I take your point, Dave. Back in the day, there wasn't like, can I have your CCV number on the back of your card, and can I have that? There's none of that. But there must have been a name and an address at least, surely.
I mean, at that time as well, and I remember there used to be guys that would drive around in cars, and they'd pull up at your house for your interest. But again, they must have known the address and rent your stuff out the back of their Ford Fiesta. It was used to drop her off at ours, and the Blueies were in a different section. We weren't supposed to see them. So so that we know that these things weren't, the information wasn't out there. However, somebody somewhere must have known who that card belonged to, and their address.
Okay, so I'm going to make I'm going to get loads of people on my back now, but that's complete, right? They must have more information on this case than either A, is out there, B, they're letting on, C, and I get the fact that there might be some sort of secret activity. It's a live open case and therefore you can't share it, and I'm sure there's lots of red tape, but we obviously are aware of the basic facts because that's out there there isn't that much speculation. Nobody's been named in terms of, we think it might be this guy or we think it might be this guy. So no one's been persecuted in terms of false allegations or anything else, because they literally, from memory, they never named anybody even as a potential suspect.
No, and that's the thing. That is the thing, and it's always the case with police cases. They don't release all the information out there. They need to hold some things back so that when they do speak to the people, that there is something out there that your random man off the street who may want to
Wouldn't
confess
know.
to a crime wouldn't
Yeah.
know. So they,
Yeah.
there's various specifics that they don't share. So they know that there is. So the taxi itself, obviously, as you would expect, had a number of fingerprints in it. So thus, there's an assumption that the killer's fingerprints are in there, unless by some sheer stroke of fortune that day he didn't touch anything. But bear in mind, he's been picked up from Hanley in the early hours of the morning, probably had consumed some alcohol. That, maybe he didn't touch anything, he didn't leave a clean print, or it was rubbed off intentionally or unintentionally because there were a number of other fingerprints in there. And a lot of these have been later identified as known passengers. So the people who were known to be passengers, they got in contact with them so they could rule out a number of the fingerprints. And police have appealed for other travellers who weren't known to come forward, but no one has come forward. Even with recent advancements in fingerprint and DNA technology, no one else has ever been identified from travelling in the cab that night. That's disappointing, isn't it?
So they put a shout out to say that if you were picked up at 11 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, hours before, with absolutely no reason to feel that you're going to get in trouble, they still didn't go forward.
No.
I suppose if it's from the centre of Hanley and they're perhaps they may have other crimes they don't want to be.
That's the danger. Yeah, that's the danger.
What, everybody that went into the cab that night? You might get the odd one dodgy character, dodgy geezer. Oh, I don't want to be seen in Hanley. I'm having an affair, or I'm doing this, or I'm dropping something off, or whatever. But everybody?
Yeah, but we're talking, Saturday night or whatever night it was in Hanley.
But what damn early? How many fares did he pick up? 20 odd fares that night or something?
Yeah.
But people might just,
everybody?
Yeah, but it might. There's even if you've not committed any crime, there's some people now as well as then that just think that there's a good chance that the police would stitch you up for something just to solve a crime. Why would you stick your neck out and take that chance? I've not done anything, but if I actually go forward, who knows?
The other side of it is as well, some people, we know the memory can play tricks in this, especially when you've been drinking alcohol. So they're asking for people to come forward. They're in a Scraggs taxi, number 5. I don't think we called Scraggs, did we? No, we didn't. I'm sure our car said 3 on the side or what have you. There is, there's a number of reasons why people perhaps would come forward that are entirely innocent as well. But like you say, hang on a minute. I remember that time I pinched that such and such out of whatever newsagent. I wonder if they got my fingerprints on file for that. I could get done for that. I'm not going to put myself in trouble. You know what I mean? Yeah. And unfortunately,
I just find it hard to believe that out of the, let's say, the 20 fares or whatever you said that he collected that night, that everybody went.
No. And that's the unfortunate thing. So, like I said, when we go back to the start of this as well, and he mentioned that they sort of swept the whole of the Mow Cop area and interviewed everybody and asked for information. There's one person who they were unable to talk to. So there's the Mow Inn, which is on the hill as you go up to Mow Cop. That evening, there was a gentleman who was sleeping in his car in a red Ford Escort, who they have been unable to trace. Now, this person may or may not have seen anything, and bear in mind he's taking the decision to sleep in his car on a very cold night when it's snowing in December. And back then, those old Ford Escorts weren't particularly well insulated, so he's not making a rational decision right off the offing. He's clearly probably had a couple of beers and been sensible and chose not to drive home. May not have seen anything. But if that was me, and I'd done that, I'd be thinking, a murder occurred just far, just a few, however, less than a mile away from where I slept. There before the grace of God go wide. That could have so easily been me.
Yeah, but think about the times then. Think then, if you, back in 1990, right, if you were there and you lived in Longton, Burslem, Tunstall, you just drove home, there's no Facebook, there's no Instagram, there's no Twitter, there's no live streaming of constant local news, there's no local papers online. You either read the Sentinel, listen to local radio, or you might just not even know it happened.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You never know, I guess. And if I say, for example, this gentleman did actually live in his car, then maybe he wouldn't necessarily have access to that local media. Although I imagine it would have been on Radio on Stoke and Signal Radio and the different radio stations at the time. I don't know. But sorry, go on.
They knew it was a red Escort. They surely would have had the registration number then.
Well, not necessarily, because it's all well and good sort of saying, well, I remember a guy listen, it might not have been an escort. It could have been an Orion. It could have, it
Oh,
could have been a
okay.
Cavalier.
Oh, sorry.
But
I thought,
somebody,
okay. I thought that was
somebody remembers
okay.
somebody sleeping in a red car in a pub. It's not, it's not a police report. Just somebody
Right,
remembers
okay.
some individual who in the morning
Right.
was gone. And maybe a transient character or just somebody who's been sensible and slept off the booze before he drove home. So
Okay.
later that morning, sometime between 9:30 and 10:30 a.m., a woman walking her dog in an area a mile away called the Rookery. It's not somewhere I'm familiar with. I don't know if you guys know it. No.
A mile away from Mow Cop.
No.
No,
Anyway,
I can't place it.
so she comes across a man with dishevelled, mousy hair, someone who could very easily have spent the night out. And she says to him, the morning after the night before, as she's just trying to make conversation with this rather unruly looking stranger that she's just happened across in the early hours of the morning. And he replies, no, it's much worse than that. Now, he was wearing a pair of good quality blue pants. Those are her words, not mine. She described them as being very good quality blue pants. A cream or off-white shirt with blood near the top of this shirt. And he appeared to have scratches on his face. And the thing that really caught her attention was this man wasn't wearing a coat. So say, for example, had been out the night before, been out to a club and got a taxi home, might not need an overcoat. This man wasn't wearing one. And police believe this may very well be the murderer. And later they will release an artist's sketch of the man, which we will share on our social media. But yeah, this man, as far as we know, well, they might have interviewed people who they believe to be him, has certainly never been brought in for questioning for certain. Or he certainly hasn't been ruled out, that's for sure.
How can that, like, you think about it now, and I know back in 1990 it wasn't the case and stuff, but, potentially a prime suspect in a murder case has spoken to somebody else, effectively sort of incriminating himself by saying, well, yeah, and it's not the day after the night before, it's much worse than that. Said something a bit dodgy, a bit shady, and effectively then just gone on his merry way, never to be seen again. And this woman sort of never really thought about it and not really done anything about it.
No.
I mean, did they? I mean, if there's scratches on his face, did they link that to fingernail samples from underneath the fingernails of the victim?
That information isn't out there, unfortunately. However, I would like to think that maybe it is there. And like I say, the advancements in DNA technology, the advancements in fingerprint technology, that if someone were brought in now, we'd have a much better indication of that. I hope, that evidence has been treated well in terms of that it's there, it could be used to identify this person.
Yeah.
But one thing we can assume is the person who had done it did not seem to have, or hasn't had since, a form of criminal record where his fingerprints have been taken, because they haven't matched up. Back then, you probably would have had to match fingerprints by eyesight. Nowadays, they'd be put into a computer and it would do that research for you and match with all the best intentions who it was most likely to be.
I know you've got, and I know, I'm not sure what the English equivalent is. It might be called the AFIS system. So you punch you scan a set of fingerprints in, and you see it on all films, and it matches. But it only matches people or people whose fingerprints are known. Because obviously not everybody's fingerprints are known, are they? So it's only somebody that's in their system. So if a crime's committed, they try to match it to somebody that's in their system already. And if no matches are there, it just means that this person just hasn't been picked up, so they're not known to the police.
No.
And as you said, Ad, and again, I don't know if it's a personal vendetta. Potentially, that individual, the perpetrator, could have committed that crime and never committed another crime at all at any point in his life. I mean, I don't know about you guys, I don't remember ever having fingerprints taken, so I wouldn't appear in the system, I don't think. There was that lollipop incident a few years ago, but we never got fingerprinted for that, so keep that on the custody, you know what I mean? So I don't think I ever have. So this guy's committed a really heinous crime and then not committed any other crime to get his fingerprints taken So then now they've retested to match, because I'm assuming that they've retested fingerprints from 1990 at regular intervals or up until last year, 2 years ago, whenever the last time they did it.
Well, yeah, I'll cover off that last bit of information there, which will sort of answer that question in a little bit. But yeah, you're quite right. That's a fair assumption to make, guys. Absolutely. But one last key information here, which is why you made a comment earlier. He's clearly linked to the local area. And police believe that even if he is no longer living in or around this area, the people who know him still are. And the people who know what he did still are. Because on Christmas Eve, Biddulph Police Station received a phone call saying that the individual who phoned up said that they knew who had done it. Unfortunately, they never went on to extrapolate on that. They never gave a name, and they never left their name either.
And phone calls weren't able to be traced, or who the phone was registered to, or
clearly.
Because nowadays you turn around and you go, you've been talking sort of thing, and it'd be like, okay, so where's the nowadays you'd ping, you'd ping it or whatever, But surely back in the day they would have been able to trace at least where that incoming call came from.
That's it. So what I'll do now, we can do an overview of the case. I'm just going to run through everything that's happened since in terms of Staffordshire Police. So on the 22nd of December 1991, Kathleen Johnson, his wife, appeals for information. I think someone is shielding the person, she states. That's unfair to his two daughters, Deborah and Roxeanne, and to his parents. In July of 1995, a man is arrested and interviewed regarding the case after a taxi driver is robbed at knife point in Packmore. He's later released, obviously not without charge. He was obviously charged with that, but was deemed to be unlinked to that. July 1997, a man is arrested in London and questioned about the case, but is later released without charge. December 2005, Stephen's former employer at Scraggs Taxis offers a £5,000 reward to help catch the murderer. As far as I know, that reward is still available today. So if you do have any information, there's £5,000 there that will hopefully encourage you to do the right thing. December 2010, the case receives a major review on the 20th anniversary, which is really disappointing that someone could go 20 years without any new information coming to light, and yet here we are 32 years on. June 2014, a third man is arrested as a suspect. So there's only been 3 suspects arrested in this case. The police describe this as a major breakthrough, but he's released from police bail around about 5 months later without charge. In December 2018, police again appeal for information, but no one comes forward. December 2020, police state that they are still hopeful that the case can be solved despite it being 30 years unsolved. And last December 2021, DCI Jason Everett states, "We still believe that the murderer still has connections locally. We believe that someone has been told something or that someone remembers something. The case is no longer being actively investigated. Instead, it is being periodically reviewed," which is the reason why when I read that I thought I'd like to do something and put that information out there. 32 years on. It really is, and I make no apologies for saying this, a real stain on Staffordshire Police's reputation by not solving this. I know it's difficult, but it's there. It's there to be seen. There's a lot of key questions that go unanswered. There's so much unanswered about this. Well, so like I said, guys, yes, the fingerprints have clearly been investigated. The case has been reviewed, but they're still not coming forward. And 32 years on, you have to believe it's unlikely to be solved.
Yeah, I mean, there's various statistics, isn't there, about murders in the first 24 hours, the first 48 hours and stuff. And obviously, the longer you leave it, the less chance there is and all of that sort of stuff. But, I don't want to say something that's wrong, inaccurate, damn right inflammatory. But, come on, Twitter folk, if there's anyone out there that's got any information, sort yourself out, do the right thing. It's a crime that is local to us. It needs solving. Somebody out there knows something. You've got to get it sorted.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, if they were out, this person, the murderer, was out in Hanley, presumably out with friends, people that knew him, then after it, if it wasn't planned, found a knife from somewhere. Did they ever find a knife or anything?
No.
So he's presumably he might have been carrying a knife because otherwise, but he obviously hasn't planned it because he's wandering around in Rookery, which is in the Stoke-on-Trent area somewhere, probably through Rookery Hall and towards Nantwich, even if he's made a bit of a walk, perhaps along the canal or something. And he's
I think it's near Kidsgrove, from what I can tell.
Okay. And then he's gone home. Somebody will have, you didn't come home last night. Why didn't you come home last night? Or there's blood on your shirt, or where's your jacket? Or, why have you been acting a bit funny? Where are those scratches come from? He's gone to work the next day and people have seen somebody who's got scratches on the face. Where'd you get them? Oh, I had a bit of a fight last night at the nightclub or whatever. All of that would have been going on. Then it would have gone on the news and people would have been thinking, was that him? I wouldn't. Yeah. Nah, of course not. But it just takes one or two of those people to say, I remember just before Christmas, I was 17 or 18, 20, whatever. It was my 21st birthday that year. And bloke I worked with came in with scratches on his face.
Yeah.
Just takes something like that to call the police and say that.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're interviewing them, you're interviewing their friends. You remember anything? Oh, yeah, I do actually. And, and it could be somebody that if they were 17, 18, that's our age.
Yeah.
So somebody could just be our age, 50. Could be somebody you went to school with.
Yeah, exactly. And like Dave says, if you're making that comment about somebody and you're phoning up saying, this person, I remember them with a scratch on the face, if it ain't them, it ain't a problem. No, I'm done.
Yeah.
No, I'm done.
And that's the thing, and it's the not being scared, not being worried about the repercussions, because actually, you got scratches on your face, but actually it's my cat. You know what I mean? It jumped up and it scratched me or whatever, and actually, I've got a cat and it's proven and then hey, fair enough, got no reason to hide it, sort of thing. But you eliminate that person. But if you keep doing that, and enough people do that, you're going to get to a person that you can't eliminate.
Exactly. It's something that needs solving. There's two girls out there who are now probably 40-ish, who've gone without their father for 32 years, and that is a wrong that needs righting.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So the last thing we're going to do, yes, it's a little bit shorter than we normally last an episode, but I think it's just important to cut it off, when we come to an end rather than jabber on. So if you do have any information, don't contact us. Contact Crimestoppers on 0800 555 111, and we'll put that telephone number in our show notes. So it's there for you to do so. And if you do know something, I would urge you to do something about it.
Yeah.
So that's sorry, go on, Dave.
I was just going to say, don't dismiss something. Even if you just think it might be a vague memory, it might have or might not have been around that time, let the police deal with that. You just tell them what you think you know.
Yeah, exactly. The smallest piece could cause the tower to fall. And that's important to remember. The most insignificant thing to you could be the most significant thing in this case. So just have a think back. I know it's 32 years ago, but just have a think back, because there's people whose lives have been changed by those acts that day. So that's me done. It's been a somber episode, but I make absolutely no apologies for that. So do you want to say our goodbyes and wish our listeners well for the Christmas and New Year period?
Yeah, look, I'm just going to echo what Dave and Ad said, really. It's if the shoe was on the other foot and it was you, and you felt there was somebody out there that perhaps did know something or was hiding something, you would want that information, wouldn't you? You'd want them to come forward. You'd want them to do the right thing. So, everything that we've said, we just want it. We want it cleared up. We want the family to have some closure and everything else. So, let's slightly more somber episode. And I agree with that. I make no apologies for recording this episode whatsoever. And it's raised a couple of questions. It's raised a couple of inconsistencies. And if anyone out there, if it does pique your sort of memory or jog your memory, absolutely just what Dave said. Just make the call, because what might seem really insignificant to you might make the absolute world of difference to somebody else and to the case. So, give Crimestoppers the call. And I'd say, slightly more somber episode, but enjoyed it all the same. I hope you guys have found it informative, and for our listeners in other countries other than the UK, Google it. There'll be certain bits of information that are out there. But in particular, our listeners in the UK, if there is anything, you've heard anything, just get in touch, guys, and let's get this solved after what felt like, a significant length of time.
Exactly. Dave?
Yeah, nothing to add to that really. It's somber episode, but these things happen. These things need to be talked about. You've got to keep these things going, because if everyone stops talking about it, one thing's for sure, it never will be solved.
Very true. And we'll end it on those important words.